All right, well, welcome once again to the Undergraduate Research Workshop Series. If you're new to this, my name is Gareth Jones. I'm the Assistant Director in the Office of Service Learning and Undergraduate Research. And our office helps put on the Expo that you're all going to be presenting at the end of this month, coming up very quickly, just around the corner. So again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. Obviously, you can reach out to your programmers as well, but I'm happy to answer those as well for you. So I'm real excited to see all the great work that y'all are going to present. Awesome. And then we're also being joined by Neelu Pargas, one of our Vistas, who's wonderful here, and I might have her chime in a little bit today. So today I had a wonderful person lined up to do the presentation, but unfortunately they got sick at the last minute. So you get me again. But we're talking about ethics and leadership positions, and I definitely have a lot of experience in that. So I feel like I have still a lot of good information to pass on to you today. Unfortunately, Tyler Huang, who was going to present, had to back out at the last minute. Great guy, but unfortunately had to back out. So you get me. But that being said, again, I feel like I've got a lot of good information here for you that I can share with you and some experience. So again, we're talking about ethics and leadership positions today. So let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint. All right, let's start the slideshow. All right, great. So first, I'm going to preview what we're going to be talking about today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the general science ethics. A lot of you are taking the online Canvas Undergraduate Research 101 course this summer, and there's a great module there. I'm going to kind of brush or kind of go over some of the basics from that for those who aren't taking that course. I might ask for some of you who've already taken it to participate a little bit with that discussion. Then we're going to talk about specifically what is ethical leadership and how it connects to research, of course. Then we're going to talk about ways to collaborate. So think creatively about ways to make your lab environment a positive environment where you collaborate with your colleagues. But of course, sometimes there are bad situations. And so I'm going to give you some advice if you find yourself in one of those, if it's a toxic lab environment, maybe some exit strategies. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then end on a high note with some good lab leadership concepts, and most importantly, how to foster an inclusive lab environment. That's really important. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So that's what we're going to cover today. Again, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll do my best to answer that. I am going to have it be a little bit more interactive today as well. So just be ready to participate with this. It'll make it more, I think, engaging. So first of all, general science ethics, just kind of refresh people who've taken the Undergraduate Research 101, but also to see what you remember about this. Do you all remember what the trolley problem is? If you've watched The Good Place, you definitely know about the trolley problem and these two kind of approaches to ethics. Anyone want to throw in the chat room what the deontology is? See if you remember the difference between the two. All right, we got some good comments here, I think. Let's see here if anyone's put anything in there yet, or if you're still typing. Anyone want to take a stab at it? Want to give it a guess? Anyone remember this from the W-based? Anyone watch The Good Place? Am I making a tool and a reference there? Do you remember what the trolley problem is? Aha, Brett has put in something. Thank you, Brett. If there's a person in front of a trolley and you have the opportunity to redirect the trolley, should you or should you leave it? So basically, yes, it's a situation where you have the control of the lever. It can either go and kill 5 people, or you can direct it to go and kill 1 person. And you have to make a decision based off of that. And based off of that, you can come to these kind of 2 philosophical approaches to ethics. So yes, thanks, Brett. Anyone else want to chime in between the difference between these 2, or what these 2 things are? Feel free to throw that in the chat. I might put Nilu on the spot. Since she joined us. Nilu is she presented a wonderful workshop a couple weeks ago. Thank you, Logan. Can you expand a little bit upon that? It's rule-based, or if someone else wants to jump on that a little bit. Feel free to vocalize too if you'd like to. You don't have to use the chat, but.
Yeah, I can just expand on that. So
absolutely,
deontology is rule-based, while consequentialism is just whatever action produces the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. Deontology, you might have a rule like killing people is wrong, and so you never kill people. But a consequentialist might be okay with killing someone if it was Hitler, because that might do the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people.
Excellent, Logan. Very good explanation for that. Thank you for that. So again, it's one of those what if hypotheticals, right? But we are these are really important things to think about is in the COVID world, right? We are making these kind of decisions all the time right now. We're not just hypothetically making some of these decisions. The ethics behind vaccines and these things, and of course in a lab you're going to have to sometimes make these kind of decisions, right? Or come to some, maybe not this one specifically, obviously, but similar type of situation. So it's good to think about that and have some at least some experience with thinking about that philosophy. So thanks, Logan. That was great. The next thing that the module went over was the Tuskegee case study. And again, this is something I think very pertinent to today's world with COVID, and why there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy. Can anyone throw in the chat, or if they want to speak out about what the Tuskegee case study is, for those of us who don't know about it? Feel free to throw it in the chat, or you can speak out loud. I see some people typing. It might appear there in the chat. Nilu, if you're with us, do you want to chime in with it? Someone threw something in the chat. Excellent. Izzy put the black men were used in a study for syphilis, but it was without their consent. Yes, they were not given the penicillin to help with that. They were experimented on without their consent. Absolutely. And it's a famous case, and obviously it's here in Alabama. It's especially pertinent here in Alabama. And I think it's obviously led to a lot of distrust of research and science. And that's really important for what you're working on today. So it's something you have to consider when you think about ethical standards. So yes, thank you, Izzy, for chiming in with that. Appreciate that.
If I could, can I say a little more about it?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the Tuskegee syphilis case study, what had happened is that the men were basically told that the study was on bad blood. And at the time in that area, bad blood was anything ranging from like migraines to like syphilis, of course, and to other issues as well. So they weren't even sure what was being studied. And they were studied for years, and even after penicillin was released, none of the men were given penicillin. So they continued to study them without treating them, even though treatment was available. And some of these men even like ended up, causing their loved ones to also be infected with syphilis, which is why the government ended up later apologizing to them and also providing health care to them and their families. But many of the men passed away by then. I mean, of course, the government's apology and all that doesn't counteract what's happened, but we're aiming to avoid doing that. But like Gareth said, one good thing is that because of that, we came up with a lot of different stuff.
Absolutely. Although, and we're going to go over some of that stuff, but there's even cases today. The Henrietta Lacks case is another study to look at, where her genetic identification was used over and over without her permission, and then without her family's permission. And that was very recent. So it's still, again, really important to think about that when you're conducting research. Any other thoughts? Make sure no one's in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat, but yeah, thank you, Nilu, for expanding upon the Tuskegee case study. Thank you so much. So with all of those things that happened, as well as many others, obviously, that in 1979, the Belmont Report was created. And this was where the researchers got together and decided we have to have some kind of agreement where we talk about what ethical standards we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. And so this report was created. And again, the module goes into a lot more depth on it, but it's really significant because it led to the creation here at UAB and many other institutions, the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, where every research plan pretty much has to go through a review by trained and specialized individuals who look at these research plans and concepts and make sure that they're ethically sound, and that they are not doing any harm. That's one of the big things that also goes back to the deontology versus consequentialism. That deontology really, that rule is do no harm, right? So that's another thing to think about. But so maybe some of you are even working on an IRB or worked on an IRB plan this summer, or maybe you have experience with that at a previous institution. But it is, it's an experience you're going to have if you're in research. So it's good to know about it. And then also the module went a little bit into the research misconduct. So the FFP. Anyone want to chime in with what those FFP stand for? You can throw it in the chat, or you can yell it out. Let's see if you remember any of that. You might be able to guess one of them. Maybe you know all three of them. Not seeing anything in the chat. Anyone want to try to guess one of them? If not, we're going to have to go to our ringer with Nilu. Aha, we have someone. Fabrication, falsification, plagiarism. Thank you, Brett and Trenton. Absolutely. So those are the big three when it comes to misconduct. And that can apply to research labs, as an undergraduate. So those are things you need to be aware of. So if you haven't completed that module yet, I obviously wish you success in completing it soon and learning more about what those things are and those definitions. We aren't going to go into a lot of detail because I want to talk a little bit more about leadership, but I also wanted to just show you, just kind of lay out the basics here at the start about some of the things that were covered in that module so that you have some understanding there. All right. So let's talk about the ethical leadership, this definition. And there's a wonderful article from 2005 by Emmy Brown and L.K. Trevino and D. Harrison that talks about where they did a lot of research on ethical leadership, and they came up with this definition. So it's the demonstration of normatively appropriate conduct through personal actions and interpersonal relationships and the promotion of such conduct to followers through two-way communication, reinforcement, and decision making. All right, so that's a fairly long definition. What about, I just want to get feel real quick, what do you think really stands out to you when you look at that definition? What's something that's really significant in your own experience now that you've been in a lab and a research experience, or maybe something previously that you've experienced? What do you think really stands out to you? Go ahead and throw that into the chat and we can kind of see which ones jump out at you the most. We'll give people a minute or two to do that. Gabrielle has put in reinforcement, interpersonal, personal actions. Awesome. Keep them coming. I want to see what kind of really jumps out at you the most. Two-way communication, absolutely. Conduct. All right. Well, I think you hit on the most important. I totally agree with those who've put things on there. Those are really important. But you know, how you conduct yourself in a leadership position, how you communicate with people, how that is reinforced with the actions that you make. Those are all really important. Personal actions. So thank you, Brian, for putting that. I think that's really important. That it's how you conduct yourself is so significant. So that's their definition. Let's look at it now and kind of apply it to a lab environment now, because that was kind of more general for any kind of leadership position, not necessarily just in a lab. But what do you think are key elements to have a positive collaboration in a lab? Again, throw it in the chat. Be creative. What you've worked in a lab this summer, maybe you can think of some elements that are being applied that have made it a positive experience. We've all had group work. Group work's a big part of research. We've probably all had bad group work experiences, but maybe you can think of good group work experiences. What were some key elements there? So let's drop those in the chat for us so we can share that with each other. And Neil, feel free to throw some stuff in there too, since you work with our group here in the office. And then I'll list out some key elements here to see if you guess any of them. Good one, Gabrielle. Reading the right papers. Excellent. What else people have? Positive collaborations. Think about your experience this summer. If there's anything that jumps out at you, that compromise, good, communication, taking responsibility, transparency, excellent. Let's see what else you got. I'm hearing from some wonderful people. Let's expand even further. I'm sure you can all think of something positive from a collaboration that made it positive. Maybe not necessarily even in a lab, but maybe a group work project that helped. You could expand on something else that's there too. Just throw that into the chat so we can share it with others. Very good, Kayla. Excellent. Understanding from another person's point of view. Positive attitude, absolutely. Really good ones. Give people just another minute or so to enter something there. We'll see how many of you lined up with ones that I have selected as well. Planning, setting goals, excellent. Giving and receiving constructive criticism, excellent. Equitable contributions by all parties, phenomenal. These are really great. Fantastic. All right. Feel free to keep dropping stuff in there, but I'm going to go ahead and show you the ones that I had listed. And I think there's definitely some crossover with a lot of the stuff that y'all had in the chat for sure. So first of all, from the PI, the principal investigator, the mentor, they should model good collaborative behavior, right? And one of the best ways to do that is clearly defined roles. And I think hopefully you're experiencing that this summer, where you came into this program, you understood what your role was in that research lab or experience, and you knew the structure. Again, the clearly defined structure of every lab is really significant. What, you know, starting at the top with the PI or the lead mentor, and then of course postdocs and graduate students and research assistants and people doing a gap year, and then the undergraduates working at the bottom, working their way up. But clearly defined structure is really important. I know multiple people were talking about communication needs to be clear and concise, needs to be, you know, on a regular basis. Accountability, admitting where mistakes are made, and transparency. I saw that one. I think that was Brian's. That was a really good one. You know, being accountable on both sides, you know, that you are given responsibilities, but good leadership also understands the responsibilities from their part is sometimes is to be accountable for what's happening. And then giving credit where credit's due, really important. But I liked a lot of the ones that you listed. I really liked looking at different perspectives, listening to everyone, bringing everyone to the table, all those things. We're going to get into that a little bit further here, but some really good elements there that y'all described. So thank you for contributing to that. All right. So let's talk now. Say you're not in a positive situation, right? And things are challenging. Let's talk about maybe some ways to get out of that. Give you some advice on that, because I do get students who come to me very often, well, not very often, but I would say periodically, and it's not a good fit for whatever reason it is, whether it's the poor leadership at the top, or it's maybe just some kind of research you're not interested in, or, you know, something really there's a whole spectrum of experience. But let's talk about some ways to kind of evaluate that and kind of deal with that situation. So first off, when I talk to students, I do say have an exit strategy and don't just leave. Don't ghost the PI. Don't just leave a lab. There's a process for this, and just remember that you know, there is a process. There are people who you can talk to who will listen to you if there are issues and concerns, but there are better ways than just leaving a lab, because sometimes if you do that, you've burned a bridge, and you've lost a possible letter of recommendation. And also people talk, of course, they, you know, say, oh, this student, they left, that, you know, don't hire them or do anything like that. If you can come up with a way to exit in a positive way, then at least you have a good transition to your next research position. But as I say here, still document things. It's really important to document things, you know, using proper communication channels for things, you know, using email and those, you know, those type of, rather than, you know, texting or anything like that. I think it's really good to document your concerns, right? Or if maybe there is something really unethical happening in the lab, you know, taking photos of it or something like that. There's definitely ways to document if you have concerns, right? Make sure that all communication has been tried, because sometimes, and understandably, students can be overwhelmed or, you know, don't feel like they can talk to a PI in this type of situation. But just make sure that you have expressed a concern. And then if they don't address that concern or deal with it, then you can go to other channels. But if you don't even try, that and you haven't documented that you've tried that, then you're in a tougher situation, right? So it's important to make sure that you've explored every communication so that everyone is, feeling that they've tried. Ask for advice from a trusted source. So again, I do get students who come and talk to me, since I'm kind of an objective source that they can talk to, and they ask for advice. And sometimes we talk about a situation and say, well, is it something you can stay in for the rest of the semester? Do you need me to talk to this person? Have you talked to other people in the lab? Have you talked to maybe the chair of the department or the program leader? There's all sorts of ways that you can do this properly without having blowing it up. So talking to people, other mentors that you have, colleagues, all of those things. Talk to them, see if they have advice on if there's a particular difficult situation within that lab. And then the proper channels. And here at UAB, we have an anonymous portal on our research at the Office of Research has, where you can log concerns with that. And so very often if a student doesn't feel comfortable talking to this research mentor, that there are ways that you can still report that anonymously. But again, rather than just, unless it's an unbearable situation, and we can, I talk to students about that. Sometimes you have to, get all other resources here on campus that can help with those. And there's human resources. There are people that you can go to. Don't think that you're on your own, but ultimately you can still log a concern or complaint through our anonymous portal. So if you go back to your home institution and there are issues like this, again, hopefully there are resources there that can walk you through this process. But these are just some quick things to think about when you get into what could be, a toxic situation. But there are ways very much often to find your way out of it. And I'll give you an example. There, even at the graduate and postdoctorate and even the doctorate level, sometimes there are concerns with authorship. And that's one thing, we're giving credit where credit is due. That can be a challenging situation if there's a publication that comes out and maybe not the right credit is given. But again, there are processes for that that you can talk to. And so if you're here at UAB and you're having an issue with that, absolutely, I hope you feel you can reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through that process. And hopefully you have that back at your home institution as well. Okay, so let's talk about good lab leadership. We just had examples of lots of toxic discussion there. And so we talked about creating a good environment through collaboration, but this is specifically lab leadership, the top of the lab, and being a good leader. And that leading by example, I think, is really important. And this is actually one of the leaders here on campus, Dr. Vora, it leads one of the summer research programs here. I think he's a great leader that leads by example. And hopefully you all have mentors this summer that are engaged in your experience, right? That are not just using you for free labor, but are actually engaged with you in the process so that you were learning from them. And that's what good leadership is when you are in a lab, because that's something when you get your own lab, when you were a full PI later in your academic career, you want to be that type of leader. You want to be able to lead by example. And one of the ways to do that are these other things that are listed. So flexibility. And I think this is a really key thing that we're learning more and more obviously during the pandemic. And we've all had to learn to be flexible. My philosophy, I've talked about it before, is space and grace, that we have to give each other space. We have to give each other grace during the pandemic. But I think that's hopefully a lesson that we can learn as we go forward, that you can still apply that level of flexibility when you're working with undergraduates. So I think that PIs, yes, there are certain schedules and there's certain things that have to happen, but I think hopefully there's more understanding and that they can see themselves from your perspective. That was a great contribution earlier, where, to put yourself in the shoes of the undergraduate, right? And try to have some flexibility. Inclusive, and we're going to talk a lot about that in the next slide here, but it's really important to include everyone in the lab, all right? That you are listening to everyone, that they are all participating, that they are all part of the team. When I talk to undergraduates about research, I kind of talk about research with a little r and research with a big R. And research with the little r is where you just are learning the basic skills of, data entry or dishwashing or, basic elements. But when you get to be part of the team where you are participating in the meetings and asking the questions and presenting the research and maybe publishing the research, that you're included in all of that. And that there's diversity in that inclusion as well. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. Transparency was mentioned before, but I think honesty is a huge part of being a good leader. Even if it's bad news, it's important to have that transparency and be honest with people working in your environment. And to show that you care, empathy, right? Our office is the Office of Service Learning and Undergraduate Research, and service learning experiences are a great way to build empathy. And I think that's one of the most important things you can apply as a researcher and as a leader, to care, to really care about what your research is, but also the people you're working with and the people that will hopefully benefit from your research. To really exhibit that as a leader is really important. To have principles. We started off our discussion today talking about the different ethics in history, and how those principles were developed. But to have clearly defined principles, a mission statement or something, if you will, that clearly shows you what principles they're following, what ethical standards they're following, that are, universal or specific to that lab. It's really important to be principled. And then fair and balanced. Kind of an overused phrase in some ways today, but I think it's really important to have that approach as a leader, that you are, again, including everyone, make sure that everyone is part of the team, that you're being fair, that there's a balance in that lab. And that can be tricky, especially when you have different levels of experience, right? But great labs that I've seen have a whole series of incredible mentors, and they create an environment. The leader at the top creates an environment where everyone is supporting each other. So hopefully you're all experiencing that to a level this summer, and hopefully you can experience it when you get back. And again, the ones that are highlighted came from that great article, Social Learning: Perspective to Construct and Develop Testing, on leadership. So those are some things that I think create a good lab leadership. Can you think of any others? Do you want to throw anything in the chat that I might have missed that you have seen or that you think is really important for a leader in a lab to have? Nilu, have I left anything off there that you think might be a good addition?
I think one thing is making it clear exactly what can be done, so what they can do for you, and also if they can't do what you're looking for, pointing you out to other resources. Like, in my opinion, a good leader is somebody who's willing to help you move forward, even if it's not with them. And that can oftentimes be hard to find, either because they're busy or like you may not convey what you need as well. So again, that would go back to the two-way communication.
Absolutely, and honesty. I think, being upfront with expectations, I think that's really good. And that transparency that was mentioned earlier. Thank you, Gabrielle, for knowledge and a good taste in movies. Thank you for connecting it to movies. We do have a second movie coming up in a few weeks, so I'm excited for that to happen. Any other lab leadership qualities that you think are really important that we might have missed that you think would benefit the group? Feel free to throw that in the chat, or if you want to speak out, that's fine too. seeing self-awareness, but I think that's on the previous discussion. But I think that's important for good lab leadership as well. From Audrey, I think self-awareness, being aware of your position and your power, I think, and how you can use that, and your influence, I think is important to be aware of what influence you have. Again, sometimes these are things that aren't necessarily part of a normal training regimen for researchers. So maybe some of you haven't seen all of this, but it's happening more and more. And that's actually why we added this as a component for this summer, because we want you as researchers to go out there and find leadership positions, whether it's in the lab or it could be in a student organization or job. There's so many areas of leadership. If you're applying to medical school, if you're applying to a professional school, they want to see you have leadership opportunities on your resume. And it's good to go into those experiences with an understanding of what it takes to be a good leader. So that's one reason we also added. So you're more self-aware as you're developing this summer. All right. No one else is chiming in right now, but that is okay. So let's talk about fostering inclusiveness. So I brought that up earlier, and I think, we hear about, diversity and inclusiveness all the time. And I think this really connects so beautifully to what was mentioned earlier about, building empathy and seeing things from different perspectives. And if you just do a little bit of research on the research, you will find that having diverse and inclusive research teams leads to better research. That is absolutely definitive at this point. We all know that having more voices in the room and looking at things, especially science, having someone give a different perspective is so valuable. If everyone looks the same and everyone thinks the same, you're going to only get a very narrow, limited type of research. So it's really important to have diversity on the team, and great leaders recognize that and do try to foster that environment. So here are some ways to foster that inclusiveness. And first is to listen. I think great leaders listen to people that work with them. Take the time to listen. So whether it's in a one-on-one meeting or in a group, and hopefully I'm exhibiting that a little bit even today as I am listening to your feedback, but taking the time, enjoy the silence for a moment and just listen, give people a chance to speak and listen to what they have to say, because you will be surprised at how often it leads to better science. So listening is really important as a leader. Make sure everyone's there, all right, and that they are contributing. So we talked again about making sure everyone has a role in that lab, making sure everyone is contributing to the research project, has a clearly defined role, and that they are contributing. That's really important to foster inclusiveness so they all feel important. That's one of the biggest things I find with the toxic environments is when a researcher is not including the undergraduate enough, right? And as a result, they feel like they are not contributing and they aren't learning. So when you get in that position of power, it's important to make sure that everyone is present and everyone's contributing. Mention flexibility as well on how they contribute. So this is, again, listening to people and finding out creative ways that they can contribute. And we've had to be very flexible and creative during COVID. And it's been really remarkable to me to see how people have pivoted and found new ways to do research online. And accessibility is a huge part of that. And giving people access to research is so important. And, you're going to be presenting virtually at our Summer Expo. And we will continue to use that to give people access. We are going to have flexibility on how people can contribute. And it is my hope that researchers continue that flexibility with the skills that they've hopefully developed through COVID. They've learned to adapt, and suddenly they've learned that, oh, wow, things can be done a different way, that we can still have undergraduates compete or contribute virtually. We can have great Zoom meetings. Yeah, there are challenges there, but they're still really important. And again, flexibility helps promote inclusiveness. Then, of course, you need to model that behavior as the leader. You need to listen to people. You need to invite everyone to those meetings so that they can contribute. You need to give credit where credit is due. Unfortunately, sometimes I do hear about, undergraduates not getting full credit on a paper or a publication. You as the leader need to make sure everyone is included, that credit is given where credit is due. And then celebrate and highlight successes together. And that is Expo, right? It will be a massive celebration, I'll tell you that. We love to invite the community. All of our judges come from all over campus and even some outside of campus. And we celebrate the incredible work that you've done as undergraduates. And a good leader is going to help you do that. All right. And whether it is the Expo or something else. So maybe it's an in-class celebration. Maybe it's in your lab, you have a little celebration. There are all sorts of ways to highlight and show it that you value the work that someone has done. Life is challenging and research is challenging. And it's important to have these celebrations, whether it's here at UAB or, maybe you get to go on to an NSF presentation. Whatever it may be, it's so great for people to highlight that. And, I love following, social media has its ills, but it is also nice. I love these different series of highlights from the different programs of here's a student who's working this summer in this lab with this mentor. That's fantastic. Love seeing those. So some of I think your programs hopefully are modeling that for you, right? They're already celebrating the fact that you're here, you're doing great work, you're collaborating. And then, yes, at Expo, we're going to have a massive celebration, a week-long celebration of all the great work that you've done this summer. And we'll have, definitely places for each category, but everyone who gets to that point and gets a presentation that's worthy of celebration. So we'll be happy to highlight that for you. And that's something that will go right on your resume or your CV and will go with you beyond this summer, that you can continue to celebrate and highlight the success that you had this summer. Hopefully you get some letters of recommendation out of this summer. It's nice to go back to your home institution and have already a letter of recommendation under your belt, so that you can get more when you go back, because you're going to be this summer. I mean, you're working close, you're working fast. They're seeing specific things that you can do so they can write great letters, hopefully with your mentor. So make the most of that. Let's celebrate that. So those are some ways to foster inclusiveness as a leader. All right. So I know I have a couple things here in the chat. Let me just see if they're all right. There's just people signing in. And again, if you haven't signed in yet, please throw your name, email, and your program in the chat so we can make sure you're giving credit here. Aha. So Brett is asking about the schedule. Excellent question. Thank you for asking that, Brett. So abstracts are due on the 16th, or a placeholder. Then on between the 16th and about the 20th, we build the course and get everything ready for you. Then we will send you an email and you will have basically the 21st through the 25th to upload your research project. Then on the 26th, Monday the 26th, the Canvas course opens for everyone. The judges are invited in, the community is invited in, and they have all week to look at your uploaded presentations. If you're doing that, you will have the option also to do an oral presentation or a live poster presentation. If you select one of those, we will, over the next week after we get the abstracts, we will create a schedule, and it will be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll have those live events. If you're doing a live event, if you're just doing an upload of a poster presentation or an upload of an oral presentation, you upload it on that Sunday and then you're good to go for the whole week. And then the judges throughout the week will come in, leave feedback. You then respond to that feedback, and it gives you a nice time to kind of have that conversation. Then the following Monday after the expo, we will announce the winners. So that's kind of how the schedule works. Did that answer that enough for you, Brett, or did you have something specific? Cool. All right. Any other questions about ethical leadership or about the expo? I am happy to answer those.
I have a question about the expo.
Yeah.
So what will our days look like, I guess? Like, do we have to be present like 9 to 5 Monday through Friday that week?
Nope. Nope. Since it's online, people can come anytime. So if you're just doing an upload, excuse me, and you haven't signed up for a live presentation, you just have to periodically check to respond to the judges.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. But if you do click on the application that you want to do a live oral presentation or a live poster presentation, in those cases, you only have to show up for that live event. And it will be, you know, in the case of an oral presentation, you have a 10 to 15 minute slot that you're given. With a live poster presentation, you have about a 20-minute one where different judges can come in that you present in a breakout room in Zoom. But you only have to show up for that. Okay. And then you just periodically check the Canvas site to see if anyone is giving you any feedback that you can respond to. But yeah, other than that, and then the keynote address. The keynote address is that Monday at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And that's only about an hour.
Okay, got you. What are the potential benefits of doing like a live versus an upload, or is that just strictly preference?
Well, there are benefits for either, right? And you know, it depends on what your experience level is. For some people, they've never done a poster presentation. That's a good way to start. For others, they've already done a poster presentation, but they haven't done an oral presentation, so they want to do that. There are benefits for presenting either way. There are benefits to doing things live. There's that benefits to doing things pre-recorded. You know, with the pre-recorded video, that allows you to edit it and make sure it's perfect to what you want, and then you upload. So you're developing communication skills by editing that video. Whereas if you present live, you're just developing live presentation skills. So really, it just depends on what you feel you need and you want to develop. Good questions, though.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And we do have definitely awards for every category. So it doesn't matter which one you sign up for, there is an opportunity to. So we have the different categories of discipline, and then we have oral presentations versus poster presentations. Any other questions or about either the presentation or expo? Again, I'm happy to answer either. All right. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Aha. Yes, Grace, absolutely. So again, so an oral presentation is 10 to 12 minutes. It's a series of slides, usually PowerPoint, but could be Google Slides. Excuse me. And you obviously walk through the slides, you present the slides. A poster presentation is a single slide, again, usually created in PowerPoint. And you can, if you're, you just put it up, share a screen, and if you're presenting it live, you're doing it on Zoom, just like this, and you're walking people through your poster, and you have 5 to 10 minutes to do that. Or you do a pre-recorded of either version, but the length of time and the number of slides is the big difference between them. Does that make sense, Grace? Okay, good. I don't want to confuse people anymore. All right, any other questions at this time? These are great questions. Is there a website where we can find the information? We are updating it with the schedule. Well, you should have that done by the end of the week. We had to finalize a couple things with the keynote, but we should have the updated schedule. The final schedule with when oral presentations and when poster presentations are will not be finalized until we get all the abstracts turned in and we know how many people have selected to do those. But we'll have a kind of rough time frame, but we won't have a down to the last minute of, okay, here's when so and so is presenting and that. But we will have the general information there. If you look at uab.edu/undergraduate research expo, or if you just type Google UAB Expo, you can go directly to our site. There's tons of information there right now. So I recommend you do that. So yes, Kayla, you would choose which you would want to do. You're either going to do a poster, which is, again, like I said, a single slide, or you can do an oral presentation, which would be a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, you only do one. Although I do sometimes get students who want to do multiple presentations, and that has happened where they're doing multiple research projects, but you're not required to by any means. Hopefully I'm relieving some stress instead of creating more stress today, but we're real excited for you to present. If you have any other questions, again, feel free. You're welcome to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer those. But we will be sharing this with all of your programmers, so they'll send you good information as well. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions on either of those things, I thank you for your time. And again, we will make sure you have your name in the chat if you attended, so we can pass that on. But next week, we'll be talking about national and international conferences. So that should be an exciting conversation. So again, thanks for joining me, and have a wonderful rest of your week.